Good morning, Ms. Buckner and Ms. Jones. My name is J.A. Saucedo, also known as Saucy, and today I will be presenting my character analysis for Guy Montag for Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, and I'll also be presenting Essential Skill 1 for Modern World History. So, to start off with, I believe that from my thesis, I put that Guy Montag is a 30-year-old man who has always followed the rules of the system, but when he thinks for himself for the first time, he is confused because he does not know what he wants anymore or why he became the fireman he is. Throughout the book, I've read that Guy Montag has began to question why he does. Ever since he met Clarice McFarlane, he has been thinking different than what he's always done, thinking that maybe what he's doing isn't right, or can he do something else besides do the same job he's always done? Giving him that confusing thought in his mind that what if I were to change? Would it be bad because the system wants me to be this way? Or could I be what I want to be? For my first evidence, it states that Montag looked at the cards quietly. I've been thinking about the fire last week, about the man whose library we fixed. What happened to him? His boss responds with, "They took him screaming off to the asylum." But Montag, feeling a bit uneasy, thinks that but he wasn't insane. So his boss, Phoebe, arranged his cards quietly and says, "Any man's insane who thinks he can fool the government and us." I've tried to imagine, Montag said, just how would it feel, to have firemen burn our houses and our boats. During the scene, it was when Montag decides the first question, but what if that was me? Me and my house was on fire. Would I would like that? No. Montag, of course, doesn't have any books, but if he did, and his house was burned on fire, how would he feel? Would he be charged for being insane, just like the man whose house was burned? That's when he starts to think that, what definition of insanity did the man have? Was he insane for being really crazy, or was it just because he decided to not follow the rules? That is when Montag reacts and thinks to himself, is he really, what he did was it right, was it wrong? So he's confused. For my second evidence, I put during the scene where Montag and his friends decided to go to this one house that they were called there, and this woman has a whole bunch of books, but she doesn't want to leave, and the house is going to be burned on fire. It says that on the front porch, where she had come to weigh them quietly with her eyes, the quietness of condemnation, the woman stood motionless. So, of course, the woman decided to burn with her books. And Montag is wondering, why would anyone do that? He's confused and thinking to himself, would I do that if I was that woman? Would I give myself up and live, or would I die for her desire? The point is, Montag first put himself in someone else's shoes, but it was during this moment when his boss flipped the switch and the entire house blew up along with him. And later on, Montag was like, so it was the hands that started it all. He felt one hand, and the other worked his coat free and slumped onto the floor. He held his pants out into an abyss and let them fall into darkness. His hands were ravenous. His eyes began to feel hunger, as if they must look at something, anything, everything. This is the first time, well, not the first time, but many times Montag has always looked at his hands and thinking that maybe they have a mind of their own. That he blames sometimes his hands on what he has done. That, oh, my hands did this. They burned down the house. I didn't. Because Montag can't really handle the guilt. He feels some sympathy for the people whose houses are burned on fire. And he can't really live with that, which is why he always has to think of something else. That he has to look at anything, everything around him to get his mind off of what he just did, because he's afraid. Throughout the story, he begins to learn why he does this, or why he even decided to become a fireman in the first place. He had a job for 10 years, but for the first time, he decided to put himself in someone else's shoes, but he was confused. So, for Montag, he didn't know what he was doing, because he thought that it was his hands that did all the work, and he didn't have a thought, of course. single thought hesitation. My third evidence is when Montag returned from a fire. He knew that every time he would go after the fire, he would go to sleep and feel the fiery smile still gripped in his face muscles in the dark. It never went away. That smile, it never ever went away as long as he remembered. Montag, why did he smile? Well, he smiled because he felt that it was a pleasure to burn, but somewhere inside, he also felt that he did something wrong. The system demanded him to burn down houses with people who just had a book. But he thought to himself, are books dangerous? Or why is it that I always have to burn down people's houses at the flick of a switch? This was before the incident of the woman. But every time Montag would finish fire, it says that he hung up his black beetle-colored helmet and shined it. He hung his flameproof jacket neatly. He showed luxuriously and then whistled his hands in his pocket, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. Now he would fall down, and at the last moment, that's when he would put his hands out and come to a screeching halt. Meaning that he was cocky and he was also very, very confident in what he's doing. That was when he learned to think himself once. At one point in the book, when the woman's house was being burned on fire, he pictured himself in someone else's shoes for the first time. And that was in that moment when Montag was thinking to himself, did I do the right thing? Or could I have saved the woman and just burned down the house without thinking like I always do again? Or was this actually giving me a sign that I'm supposed to do something else besides burn other people's houses down? Montag was always a risk taker because he felt like there was nothing else to lose besides the life he lives. But from different incidents of burning people's houses down, he learns that there's more to his life than just burning down stuff over and over again. He knows that these people also had a life just like him. And the only thing that changed that was they read books. But why did he burn them down? Was his question. Thank you for listening to my English for well. Any questions?
Yeah, you said that Montag didn't handle the guilt.
Yeah.
Why?
He felt that it was his rightful duty to get rid of something he thought that was evil in people's houses. But at the same time, he also burned down something that someone loved, something that someone lived in. And to him, it made him think, what if someone did that to me? He would feel bad for it too. So he decides to fire them and burn other people's houses down.
What's the guilt that he feels?
Guilt that he feels that he feels sorry. He feels some sort of sympathy for the people who broke the law. And he doesn't really think that reading a book is the right punishment for burning down an entire house. Okay. Good morning, Ms. Jones. Today I'll be presenting my modern day history on Essential Skill 1. So for Essential Skill 1 is where we were supposed to decide what kind of government or who had a huge impact on American government system. For my thesis, I chose that a democratic republic had the greatest type of impact on government system because it gave power to the people and made everyone subject to law. Giving power to the people came from a democracy, and making everyone subject to law was similar to a republic back in the time of the Greco-Romans. For my first evidence, I will be talking about Greco-Roman contributions. To start with, the Greeks, they formed a democracy. They believed that there was trial by jury, and they had their people like Socrates inventing the Socratic method, and they had Plato, who believed that the wisest should rule, and there was Aristotle, who believed that people need to be placed into laws, and that people want laws so that way they can feel safe to stop chaos from erupting. And they also believed that there were natural laws on reason, intelligence, and instinct for people. That was their beliefs. As for the Romans, they believed in a republic, that all citizens are treated equally under law, and they're innocent till proven guilty, meaning that people are subject to law just like a republic, and that for a democracy, there's power in everyone and the people itself. The Romans also believed that the accuser had the burden of proof, not the accused, and they also decided that if any law would be unfair for their citizens, they would remove it. There was one flaw, however. For citizens, it was going to be for people that were under one-third of the population. Only free-born males were citizens. So the Romans thought that men were obviously would have the more benefit of being put into a society. And as for the Greeks, they believed they believed the same thing. But later on, people began to think differently of the ideas, such as enlightened thinkers started thinking, but everyone should be equal, not just men. So for my second, I put the enlightened thinkers: John Locke, Mary Wollstonecraft, Voltaire, and Barnard and Montesquieu. Now, for John Locke, he believed that everyone has the right to overthrow the government if it fails to protect their natural rights. It was at this time where the British had occupied the 13 colonies, and they were acting really unfair towards the citizens of the 13 colonies. Everyone was treated unfair, people were treated equally, and that there was a lot of different beliefs that, oh, we're better than them. That's when John Locke decided to think that, but if we have our own natural rights, so I believe that power should not be just from you guys, it should be given to the people, like a direct democracy. For Mary Wollstonecraft, she believed that equality is necessary for all, not just men. That's something that many people have thought it over, and people as in the Europeans believe that maybe that was not possible. So Mary Wollstonecraft believed that she thought that it would be possible. So when the British would leave, that was when everyone would be happier in direct democracy. Everyone should have the right to every type of liberty, including thought, expression, and religion. That's what Voltaire believed in. That is one of the reasons why people have a direct democracy and a republic to this day, because we're free to think, we're free to act, we're free to believe in what we want to believe. We have our own justice, liberty. And for Montesquieu, he believed that a government works best when powers are separated and check one another, represented like a republic. There are different representatives that are voted on, and these different representatives have each divided power, and they check on each other. Make sure that no one does anything bad, similar to what the Greeks thought as philosopher kings. So my third evidence is about the American Revolution. Why did they overthrow the British in the first place? They felt that the British absolute monarchy was being on the unfair side, meaning that they had like the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, the Intarble Acts. There was that time where America decided to think, we need a different government. Looking back at Europe's history, they had the English Bill of Rights during the Glorious Revolution. And that's when John Locke was like, well, I think we should have our own sort of paper to give us our natural rights back. That was when they came up with the Bill of Rights. At first it was the Articles of Confederation, but that didn't work so well. And later on, that was when Thomas Jefferson was influenced by John Locke and decided to think about our Declaration of Independence and our own Bill of Rights, giving us the laws we need in order to withstand our own type of government. Once the American Revolution was over, Thomas Jefferson, and John Locke, along with John Adams and George Washington, they all got into a meeting and decided to think of what government they should want, what they want. They first thought of a democracy, but then they thought that people wouldn't be smart enough to decide what's best for them. So that's when they went for a republic. In the end, they chose similar from both sides. They're both a democracy and a republic, a democratic republic. So that means that people would be able to vote for what they want, but they also have to vote on representatives to choose for them, to make the wisest decisions for them.
Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Can you tell me what the difference between direct democracy and a republic is?
Direct democracy is when the people have all the power and that they all decide to vote as one together. As a republic, people cast their votes to different representatives and they all decide what is best for them.
Okay, thank you. I'll let you read your comment.
Okay.
First source, original, and projected.
Okay. Full panel. Up.
First search.
Source?
Okay. So I'll start with my grammar tree. So what I first did was I put a comma after was seen because I felt that the whole phrase, while driving down the highway, the bad collision was seen. I felt like there could be a pause here because the tools are coming for a conjunction, just the word and. After and, I realized that my uncle was in it.
That single phrase couldn't necessarily stand on its own. So that had to be, and the conjunction puts the two phrases together. So I have to come there.
While driving, I figured that it would be a verb phrase. As for down the highway, I thought that would be an adjective phrase because down the highway tells you that it's just down the highway, describing something where it is.
Yeah.
While driving down the highway,
Wait, driving.
a bad collision was seen.
Uh-huh.
Read that sentence.
While driving down the highway, there's a comma after highway.
Notice the content.
Want me to write on the board or on the piece of
Alright, now put the comma there.
Uh-huh.
What else did commas do other than create pauses?
It lets you know where a phrase is. It tells you which phrase is a phrase and which one could just be another phrase.
So, what about pauses?
Clauses, there are two different types of clauses. Independent, which could stand on its
Sorry.
own.
What else do commas do with clauses?
They separate the clauses.
So, what we need to do?
This entire thing, right? These two are obviously different clauses, so
Alright, let's fix it.
okay.
So we got while driving down the highway,
Mm-hmm. While driving down the highway, that is the
and all that's okay. Let's see if we can make some adjustments.
while driving down the highway, it's a verb phrase and an adjective phrase, so it can't be down the highway. It is an adjective phrase. An adverb phrase
Why?
because it's telling you where,
Or,
how deeply effective it is.
there you go.
So it's just the
So all of that is the adverb phrase,
uh-huh.
including the verb phrase,
Right.
including the verb phrase. And that becomes,
Intended clause.
there you go.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, pull towards your end.
And I realized my uncle was in it.
Okay. Let's fix that a little bit.
Okay.
I agree, it should be a dependent clause, because you should never start a sentence with and.
Right.
But, you said there is an independent clause in there, right?
Yeah.
How do I know that there is an independent clause in there?
A bad collision was seen could stand on its own.
No, and I realize that my uncle was there.
Most of my uncle was in it. This is a phrase that it could stand on its own. And
It
said,
could. I agree.
Uh-huh.
But in order for it to stand on its own, what two phrases do we need?
We need a noun phrase and a verb phrase.
Stuff up there.
Sorry.
What's the noun phrase in that? So take out the and
Uh-huh.
read it just as it is.
I realized that my uncle was in it.
What's the noun phrase?
My uncle.
My uncle realized my uncle was in it.
No.
Well, I'm sure he realized it was an accident. Who realized?
The person saying the phrase.
Or?
Yeah, me.
So, let's make, you got the noun part.
Right. So my
Give I, it's credit, so make the noun the noun first.
my
No, I.
oh,
How do you want?
I realized
I, make it a noun phrase.
oh right. Noun phrase.
Boy.
Sorry.
Alright, what did I do?
What did I do? I realized
I realized,
my uncle was in it.
there we go, so what's the verb phrase?
Realized.
Alright. That, let's fix that. You said that is a preposition.
That is an adjective?
It is an adjective. I see why you would think it's a preposition.
Yeah.
But why is it an adjective?
Because it's describing my uncle. So do you want me to move on to DBQ?
No, you're good. Thank you. Or DBQ.
Okay.
Oh, you're right for it.
Oh.
This is what you're-
Okay.
Alright, walk us through the annotation.
Okay. So this is a scripture from after the American Revolution. It takes place before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Everything is said by John. It says that we hold these truths to self-evident. Yeah, I'm thinking that for self-evident. Truths are self-evident. I'm thinking that when I wrote that, it's what we know, but we don't necessarily claim or think that we have. It says that all men are created equal, but after reading about Mary Wollstonecraft, is everyone created equal to this day? That's when I started to question myself, and I'm thinking, I don't really think so. Another thing is that it says, certain unalienable or never able to violate rights. When I read that, I thought, our rights can be violated at any time. It's not promised. It also says that governments are instituted among men. That's true, but I question me thinking that not all governments to this day are created by men. Some were created by other people out there.
Alright, why don't you take your view?
Okay, my thesis is John Locke's social contract influenced the writing of the Declaration of Independence by letting everyone know that it's their right of the people to overthrow the government if it fails to protect their natural rights.
Right, isn't your evidence?
My evidence is, it says that John Locke states that all men are created equal with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, so since it's a BBQ response, that citation you put is not necessary, but let's look at, according to the text, what is it called?
Text, it's called the Unanimous Declaration of the 13th United States Congress.
So what do you think would be another more common name for that?
According to
No, I mean the title of the document.
I like the document. Moments before the Declaration of Independence was written.
What?
Moments before the Declaration of Independence was written.
That just comes moments before.
Right. Or now.
Or that it is what?
That is the signing of the Declaration of Independence.
Okay, so this is the Declaration.
Right.
Okay, so did John Locke write the Declaration?
No, it was James Madison.
You wrote the Constitution? I think you wrote the Constitution.
I know,
You said it in your presentation.
I know. Thomas Jefferson?
There you go.
Okay, so not John Locke, but yeah, my thesis is wrong.
No, your thesis is right.
Oh, according to Thomas Jefferson then?
There you go.
Okay,
Because Thomas Jefferson is taking whose ideas.
right. Okay,
So, yep.
so should I correct it?
No, there you go. Why don't you read me your analysis?
Alright, I wrote that the Declaration of the 13th, the Declaration of Independence was indeed written for the purpose to overthrow the unfair government and start a new one where all men and women were created equal, and one where the people had certain unalienable rights.
Okay, thank you.
Alright.
Do I just X it out?
Make sure you have someone with your.
Okay.